Good morning. I'm Melissa Schwartz, the managing broker of the Realty One Group Paradise Valley office, and it is a nice hot Tuesday morning here in Phoenix, Arizona. What are we supposed to be, 111 today? I think something like that. So I've got some folks in the office. I know we've got people online. If on those online, you might want to pull up an agency. If you have two screens, I'm going to go through it. But if you want to have a copy yourself, you'll need to have that separate. I do have the agency, and make sure it's the new agency for those that are not aware. Can I have one of those, please? The agency form was redone in February of 2024. It is now a 2-page document, right? It's got 2 pages there. Very important. I thought I would start with this because for those that attended the presentation by Jim Sexton last week? Oh my gosh, last week. Not all those documents are approved yet. So I didn't want to go over those. We will go over them line by line once we have the official versions. But the reality is it all starts with agency. And can somebody tell me why agency is so important? Does anybody have a big guess? And I'm going to start sharing my screen here while somebody answers that question. Any guess? Nobody wants to even guess. Let's see if I can go to the right place. Hopefully that's the right place. Okay, let's try to get me out of the picture here and go to my slideshow. All right, so we're going to talk about agency and limited agency because really that's the foundation of anything you are doing as a real estate professional. And what does that mean? We will deal with agency. What is agency? Agency is a relationship created by an express contract or implied actions. That's where people get in trouble, right? In which the agent has the authority to act on behalf of the principal, who's your client, and legally bind the principal to third parties. So why is it the foundation? Because it is what gives you the right to do anything in your real estate transaction on behalf of another person. So if we don't understand agency, how are we explaining our value to other people and certainly to our clients so that they understand that? And the biggest area we get into trouble with, oh my goodness, is that implied actions. Somebody comes into an open house, starts talking with you. You don't ask if they have a realtor. You don't ask if they have a buyer broker agreement, and you start handing out information. And you start handing out more information and asking questions of them. What is their financial situation? Can they buy a home? You have created implied agency at this point. So let's go break this down so we get a better idea of what goes into all the parts of agency. So there are a couple of different avenues. Does anybody know some of the cheat words for what goes into agency? What are the components of agency? Anybody know those cheat words? Do you remember them? Anybody online want to jump in? I'll give you a hint with the first letter. Does anybody know some of these? Oh, nobody's going to do this? Okay, well, I'm going to leave until the end. All right. So you can figure this out as we go along, but there are several key things in, in your agency agreement, and you will see them on there if you're looking at the agency form. There are quite a few of them, and there are different ways to learn how to somebody's circling them here. They're under the buyer broker section. I'll read that in a minute, but we're going to go over these sections. A buyer's broker has the fiduciary duties of, and I'm going to start with obedience just because this is one of the easy ways to remember it. It's not in the order of these. Anybody want to give me another one? Make a guess. What's next?
Are you wanting it in the alphabetical order?
In the acronym? Sure.
Yeah, I don't know what the acronym is.
How about loyalty, obedience, loyalty, disclosure? Anybody got a guess on the next one? Oh my goodness, you guys are all being quiet today. Confidentiality. Anybody got a guess on what the word is we're spelling out?
Old car.
Old car. Thank you. Somebody
Oh,
jumped
we got
on.
that completely above.
It does, right? Confidentiality, accounting, and what is the last one? Who knows what the last one is? Oh, come on. Reasonable care and diligence.
All right.
The old car is one of the ways to know this. And again, these are just ways to remember these 6 terms. Now, there are some people that do it with 7. They do carload and they throw in another word in there. Does anybody see the extra word in there?
Advocacy.
Advocacy. All right, so I'm going to go back. I don't know that can I go back to the old one? Okay, I'm going to go back to this. So obedience. You must show your obedience to your client as long as it does not violate fair housing or other laws, right? You can't violate fair housing. But if your client tells you they want to cancel a contract, they want to get out of their purchase contract on the Binzer, you must assist them in getting out of it. Now, when is that not in their best interest? Yes, you need to share with them what the risks are or what the costs may be. But ultimately, if they tell you they want to cancel, that is your job and you must assist them in that. Loyalty. You must provide loyalty to your clients, keeping their best interests at the forefront ahead of any other party, including yourself, right? You can't get mixed up in that. It is up to them and what they're looking for that you need to be looking out for. Oops, sorry, hitting my screen. Disclosure. You need to disclose any material fact that you have knowledge of. So if someone in an open house comes in and starts blurting all sorts of stuff and you do not represent them, you are obligated to convey that information on to your client. If that is information that would change how they might approach presenting, reviewing an offer, that's where your loyalty lies and you must disclose, okay? Confidentiality, you must keep confidential. Any information given by you and all parties, or I'm sorry, by the client and all parties involved, especially information that may be damaging to your client in a negotiation, right? So again, your client, that's who your confidentiality is owed to you. It is not owed to somebody that walks into an open house that you do not have agency with, right? So that's very important when somebody walks in. If your client has said they do not want you to be a dual agent, you need to make sure that that person walking in knows up front that you cannot represent them. Please do not tell me you just won the lottery. Do not tell me you have $500,000, right? Because that then has to go on to your client. And this is not about tricking people. You need to make sure you disclose that because otherwise you're an implied agency and that could get you in a heap of trouble for then disclosing that confidential information. Accounting. As an agent, you must be accountable in every step of the real estate transaction so nothing falls through that may cause a deal to end. You also need to be accountable in serving your client to the best of your ability, specific, measurable, and time appropriate, right? If you're leaving town, you need to have somebody else watching your file if you cannot field those calls. That's being accountable to your client, right? You can't disappear and not provide that service. And then, of course, that kind of follows through with reasonable care through your knowledge to guide your clients through the entire transaction process, from the search through negotiations to close of escrow. If we add advocacy in there, that has to be that you are an advocate in the decision-making process. You are serving your client's best interests to the best of your ability, protecting them in each and every situation in the transaction. Now, sometimes that gets us into trouble, right? All right, let's move on. Let's talk briefly about when limited representation occurs. I meant to separate these, but that's okay. So limited representation, either one agent or two agents in the same brokerage. The correct term, folks, is limited representation. I know we love using the word dual agent. Technically, that is not the term on our contracts at all. Okay. I think of dual agency, though, when it's one agent handling two clients, right? Two agents is definitely limited representation. How many people know how many Realty One Group agents are in the, let's say, greater Maricopa County, obviously some of Pinal, but in the greater Maricopa County area? How many know how many agents are here that are in our
I do.
company?
I know.
Make a guess.
3,000 plus.
3,000 plus. How many other Realty One Group franchisees are in the state of Arizona? How many? He's getting his sound off. You got it. All right. How many Realty One Group franchisees are in the state of Arizona? Does anybody know?
5
Five?
5
Five.
brokerages throughout the Maricopa County.
Well, I think there are many different offices. I think there are only 2 franchisees, but how many agents are under those franchisees? Any guesses? That's Tucson, Lake Havasu, Payson, Flagstaff, Yuma. No? How about another 1,000? Now, here's the trick question.
Total.
How many, if you get into a contract with someone from Mountain Desert, Realty One Group Mountain Desert, does limited representation occur?
Yeah.
Really?
So if they're part of a franchisee, that it's not within the same grill.
Limited representation only occurs within the company that falls under the designated broker. We have a brokerage here in Arizona that is corporately run. That isn't the issue. The issue is who's the broker, right? Because in order to have limited representation, the same brokerage, you have the same designated broker, right? So you have one DB over all of us, and that's why we're considered in the same brokerage. Agents in Mountain Desert in Tucson are not under our brokerage. So limited representation does not occur if it is a franchisee Realty One Group agent, okay? That's why it was a trick question. Thanks, Dave, for helping me out. Appreciate it. You stepped up to the plate. Sorry about that. Legal requirement. There is an honest legal requirement. Does anybody know what AAC stands for? No? We're used to saying Arizona revised statutes. This is the Arizona Administrative Code. That is where it requires that we do prior written consent on the legal requirement that there is limited representation. Our duties are then limited. The disclosure requirements are the consent to limited representation. It references it that in this document. It does say that if they're broker representing both buyer and seller, that would be your designated broker, right?
DB.
That's the DB. So it does reference it on here, but then you have to go get that other form and make sure you go over all of that. Let's talk about, though, this form. This was updated in February of 2024. And the top of it did not change, except for the very top line here. Does anybody see the additional, what are that, 2, 4, 6, 7 words up there? Those got added. This document is not an employment agreement. Why did we have to add that? So that our buyers and our sellers understand that this is not employing us. This is just providing how we are going to serve people. But if we want to get paid, we need an employment agreement, either a listing agreement or a buyer broker agreement. This is coming down the road, folks. If you've not been using buyer broker agreements, start using them, okay? So let's go down here. It talks about before a seller or landlord, and by the way, these terms do flip, right? Seller, landlord, buyer, tenant, enters into a what? What is that word? What is the word, right, that I did not say? Discussion. Before you enter into a discussion, when should you be giving the agency form to a client or potential client?
Immediately.
As soon as you begin talking to them, right? So that's why I talk about an open house. You can't start having a whole bunch of conversations if you're not talking about agency. So the first question should be to that person. What should the first question be to that person other than hello? I get that.
Are you represented? Do you have?
Are you represented? Are you working with an agent? And if they say yes, what's your follow-up question?
My follow-up question is, how come they didn't come with you to the open house?
Have you signed a buyer broker agreement? Because guess what? If they have not, they are not working with somebody. Very shortly, they will not be working with anybody. Because in order, other than an open house, in order to see any homes, they have to have at a very minimum the showing form. I know I have it here. Buyer broker agreement to show property, right? So you got to have one or the other very shortly in terms of what we're going to be dealing with. So
question here then.
Yep.
When they come into the open house and they tell you, yes, that they have a buyer broker agreement, but they continue to ask you questions and you tell them,
Nope.
because I had this happen.
Nope.
She got really nasty because I told her, I was like, you're going to have to reach out to your agent to get the answers to
Yep.
those questions. She got really, Ben had to ask her to leave the open house. She got so obnoxious. Yeah. So my question is, or an idea or whatever, why wouldn't they have a copy of that? If they're entering open houses without their agent and they have that agreement, shouldn't they somehow have a copy of that agreement?
That's a great idea. And maybe something you need to share when you sign with your client. When they sign a buyer broker with you, suggest that they take a photo of this and take it with them so that they have it on their phone if they walk into an open house. But what else are you going to tell them? Don't go into open houses without me.
Oh, yeah. Don't go into open houses and don't go to model homes.
Yep. Don't go into open houses. Don't go into model homes. For those of you online that did not hear that, call me. I will go with you, or I will be on the phone with you. If I can't be there, get me on the phone. I will get your questions answered, right?
Mhm.
And you're going to need to be communicating with your client on that stuff. All right. So before a seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant enters into a discussion with a real estate broker or licensee affiliated with a broker, the seller and buyer should understand what type of agency relationship or representation they will have with the broker in the transaction before you do anything further. Okay, so it talks further. It says, and I don't know how much you can read there because my little guy's in the way. Hold on, let me move that out of the way. Usually that disappears. It'll go away. Hey, there we go. Okay, so buyer's broker. A broker other than the seller's broker can agree with the buyer to act as the broker for the buyer. In these situations, the buyer's broker is not representing the seller. And here's where it comes in, folks, where we've gotten into this whole mess. Even if the buyer's broker is receiving compensation for services rendered, either in full or in part from the seller or through the seller's broker. Just because they're getting payment from them does not mean they represent the seller. They represent the buyer. And here we go. A buyer's broker has the fiduciary duties of loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, and accounting in dealings with the buyer. Other potential buyers represented by broker may consider make offers on, or acquire an interest in the same or similar properties as buyer is seeking. Have any of you been in the situation where you had two buyers that liked the same property and now you needed to know, what on earth am I supposed to do? Both want to write offers. Can you do that?
Okay.
You can. That's what Jan said, you can. Okay, other comments?
Well, you. I haven't had it happen, so I want to hear this. You have to be careful what you say. You can't share the information. You can't tell one, well, Sally's gonna, offer 150, so maybe you should offer 152.
So
You can't do that.
there's the confidentiality, right? But that sentence right there, 1B, if you will, or yeah, section 1B, other potential buyers represented by broker. That was not a capital B, by the way. So that is the agent, not the designated broker. It could be you yourself representing both, or it could be Ami representing one and you representing another. You happen to stumble into the office and somebody prints something out of the copier and you walk over and see that it's the same offer. That information you cannot disclose. That would be confidential. You cannot do harm to another agent here at Realty One Group or their clients. So that you could not disclose. But yes, you realize both of you are making an offer on that property. Okay. So, and yes, you can do it yourself. You're absolutely correct. Confidentiality must be maintained for your client. Each one separately makes it difficult, but yes, it is possible. Oh, no, it's not. On the page. There we go. All right. So we're going to just briefly talk sellers. We're really talking buyers here, but the seller's broker has the same fiduciary duties, right, to the seller, and other potential sellers represented by broker may list properties that are similar to the property that seller is selling. And not only that, your limited representation, your ER agreement also says that you may list the house next door, right? There may be other homes on that street that go up with a Realty One Group sign. Our brokerage could list 6 on the street. There is nothing to stop that. And when you signed your contract, your listing agreement, it actually says that in here. But also in here, obviously, other potential sellers represented by us may list properties similar. Okay, here we go. Broker representing both seller and buyer. This is the limited representation of the broker. A broker either acting directly or through one or more licensees with the same brokerage firm can legally represent both the seller and the buyer in a transaction, but only with the knowledge and informed consent of both the seller and the buyer. In these situations, the broker acting through its licensees represents both the buyer and the seller, with limitations of the duties owed to the buyer and the seller. This is where it gets tricky, folks, right? The broker will not, without written authorization, disclose to the other party that the seller will accept a price or terms other than stated in the listing, or that the buyer will accept a price or terms other than offered, right? So if you have a party sending in an offer, let's say you have two buyers that are well, that doesn't count. Limited representation. So you're representing both seller and buyer. If the buyer says this is what they're offering, you've had conversations with, that they can offer more. You cannot talk about anything other than the numbers on that offer that you're presenting to your seller. If your seller says, well, do you think they can go up to? I don't know. What do you want to write in the counter offer? And we'll see what they respond. You cannot surmise, you cannot propose, you cannot enter into that type of expectation that you are providing any confidential information about the price or terms, okay? Your only question to whichever party you're dealing with is, what do you want to offer? What do you want to counter? How do you want me to do that? Now, I've talked before about when you first meet with a client, when you're first talking about agency and talking about getting into searching for homes with a client, that's the time to talk about what market conditions are. What is happening with the market, right? Because you're not in a limited representation at that point. You have no limited representation boundaries. Why not talk about, in the last few months, this is what we've seen in the market. Buyers are asking for concessions to cover buying down interest rates or helping them pay their closing costs. Sellers are giving anywhere from 1 to 6%, depending on the market, part of the valley. Now, I wouldn't be saying 6% if you're in an area where you're not seeing any more than 3%. But yes, you can go up to 6% depending on what their loan is. The point is, tell them what is happening right now. Because guess what? If you get into a limited representation, the minute you walk through that door of a Realty One Group property with a Realty One Group, as a Realty One Group agent, you now are in limited representation. Oh, do you think they'll fix this? We can always ask. All you can say, right? At that point, they're like, well, do you think I can ask for closing costs? If you'd like to ask for closing costs, we can put that on your offer, right? But if you haven't talked about what things have been happening in the market and they don't even know to say, do you think we could ask for closing costs? Are they going to ask for closing costs? No, probably not. And can you bring it up at that point? No, you can't. Right? Because if you bring up saying, well, let's ask for closing costs, you are now harming another Realty One Group client. You can't do that. Right? So let's look at B here. It says, there will be conflicts in the duties of loyalty, obedience, disclosure, and confidentiality. Disclosure of confidential information may be made only with written authorization. Again, they won the lottery. They have $2 million sitting there. You cannot say a dime, right? Does that make sense? You have to keep that information private. All right. I'm not going to keep reading all of this, but I'm going to jump down. Well, I want to make sure you guys do realize, and should you be going over this line by line with your clients? Agency form?
Yeah.
Should you just be emailing this to them and getting them to sign it? No? No, you don't think so? So one of the things that's going to be really clear, should any additional, we'll go ahead and say lawsuits, should any additional concern on agents' actions be called into question, they're going to be looking for timestamp phone calls between you and your client that you could match if, for instance, you were calling them and going over the documents, or maybe your Zoom history that you were on a Zoom call with them, that you can record that you were on a Zoom call with them. But to be able to show that you were in a phone conversation with your client for 40 minutes, and gosh, 5 minutes after that conversation ended, they signed your package. I think it's pretty reasonable to understand if you say, I was on the phone going over these documents with my client, that people are going to believe that that actually occurred when you had a 40-minute phone conversation. Now, are they going to believe it if you had a 2-minute phone conversation? Probably not. I don't know. I've been talking for 30 minutes and I haven't even gotten through the whole document. And that's one document, right? But you probably should, at best case scenario, if you can have them sign the agency in person, right? Because then you can say, we sat down and discussed this together. We went over this. I had them physically sign this in front of me and asked if they had any other questions. Did they understand their agency? Did they understand not to go into an open house without me, not to go to a builder without me, right? That's all a part of this conversation. Now, how is this helping you to show your value? right? Do you think this shows your value? This doesn't do anything for any of you?
Oh, it absolutely helps, definitely. It's necessary
Why is it necessary, Dave?
because we owe this, it's an obligation to our clients to let them know, agency, everything about agency, limited representation prior to it taking place. Um, you know, everything, the old car, we have to discuss all of it.
So if I, how many people think we're gonna have buyers that are going to be insistent that they do not want representation? That they want to be unrepresented?
It's gonna happen. We don't know how many.
It's gonna happen, right? So what do you think is a good thing to sit down with that unrepresented buyer, which you have to, by the way? What form do you have to have that unrepresented buyer sign?
Agency?
They have to sign this. They have to sign this. It's going to say Realty One Group on the top and on the back. Let's see. Let me go to this next page. By the way, this was what was added to this, right? Agency election does not establish broker compensation. Very clearly, compensation paid by a buyer or seller to their broker is always negotiable. There's the key word. I wish they would have put that in bold. And the amount chosen shall be documented in a separate written employment agreement after discussion with their broker. Should a seller enter into a listing agreement, the amount of the buyer broker compensation to be offered is also negotiable and agreed upon after discussion with their broker. They must initial this, either the buyer or the seller, even the tenant or landlord, they have to initial that. I have not heard that that doesn't get initialed for those. So all of them have to be done. Now, if there is an unrepresented buyer that comes into your open house, you have to go over this form after you have discussed all those duties that they are not going to get, right? They're not going to get them, period. What box gets checked on this page? Tell me the line number, please. Unrepresented buyer.
And you're representing the seller already?
Yes,
Okay.
that's how you're having a conversation with them.
49.
49. Buyer or tenant elects that they understand that you represent the seller as the seller's broker. You cannot represent them as the buyer's broker, nor can you show buyer properties listed with the broker's firm, and that the broker shall act as agent for both buyer and seller. Only that you represent the seller as the seller's broker. And then on the bottom, on line 60, the undersigned buyer box needs to be checked. But don't you think they may have some reservations if you properly go over those issues of fiduciary duties, that they may not want to be unrepresented all of a sudden?
Yeah, that shows value.
Because you've shown a lot of value in there. So let's see what I put up here next. All right, buyer consultation. So we've already said this has to happen immediately. What else should be happening when you first meet with your buyers? Obviously the ready form, right? This is the real estate agency and disclosure election. It's referred to as ready, spelled R-E-A-D-E, or agency for those of you that prefer that. What's the other one?
Affiliated business.
Affiliated business arrangement. Why is that so important to get signed up front? What does that talk about? Title, vendors, home warranties. The marketing part of it is home warranties, and even the live easy or move easy, the concierge service. So that's important up front, because if you're bringing that in when you're writing a contract, oh, by the way, I wrote Rock Title in there. So what? You better have explained there's a relationship and why you're recommending putting that in there. so that they understand that. And by the way, we have Roberta here with Rock Title. What is something that you can take to this buyer consultation appointment that Rock Title can provide to you? Do you know? Somebody have some of these? Any guesses online? You see that? Right?
Somebody have some of what?
Home buyer guides?
Oh,
Why is this important? Does anybody know what's in this?
well, breaks it down and gives them a footprint of what all they, or, you know, what all is involved for a buyer.
Gives all sorts of things to the buyer. Let me do that slowly. I'm sorry for people online. I don't want to make you sick there. It gives a copy of the purchase contract. It goes over the whole process, talks about all the parties. So if you've ever had a brand new buyer that's never bought anything, get that buyer purchase contract into their hands at that first meeting. I'm not saying you have to go over it that day, but you should be going over it before they find the home, right? Because when they find the home, they're like, we want to write the offer. We want to write the offer. Offer has to get in right now. I don't care what it says. But you do care what it says. You need to understand what it says, right? So yep. Somebody online said something. Nope, I'm getting feedback.
They're unmuted.
Okay. Roberta is here. I'm gonna spin over to her. I know they're doing we're getting new contracts. So if you need one of these before then, contact
us. We have a small supply in office. We can get more out of customer service. We can also personalize with the agent's information on this. It can be printed out and bound like this, or it can come electronically and you can print it yourself. If there's an immediate urgent need for it, we can send
Awesome.
it digital.
And if you don't need it right now, don't ask for a whole bunch of them, because all those documents are going to change, right? A lot of those documents are changing come August 1st. Let's look at what else should be a part of that buyer consultation. There are 2 more documents you should have with you. Does anybody else know what those 2 other documents are? 4 documents. Buyer advisory.
Yeah.
Yes, buyer advisory, right? Now, please know, we do not need the 13 pages of the buyer advisory. We only need the 13th page signed, okay? So if you're meeting a client, you can take the entire packet, printed and hand to them, take an extra 13th page, get their signature on that and bring that back. The reason for this is very important. Those of you that are scanning documents, the buyer advisory is packed with information and it scans like a photo. That document alone can be 10 megabytes if it's scanning, depending on what printer you're scanning it on. It is huge. Even if you run it through your signing programs direct through DocuSign, Transaction Desk or SkySlope Forms, that document alone can be really, really large. So please, if you're going to do it on there, you can print page 13 to its own little page, send them the links to the buyer advisory because those are updated all the time, and then get the signature only on page 13. Really, really important. Just makes it a lot easier. Sometimes you'll have people say, I didn't get your offer. That's why you sent too large of a file. It's not going through. What's the 4th document you should have? If you haven't been using it, you should be now, and you sure as heck are going to have to come August.
Buyer broker agreement.
Buyer broker agreement there. Oops. Yeah. See, ROG only needs page 13. Buyer broker agreement. So your buyer consultation should include and get signed these 4 documents, right? Start working on that. For those that don't know, Thursday's Lunch and Learn this week is going to be on the buyer presentation. If you want to have an electronic presentation for yourself, they're going to go over what is on our Realty One group. One login has a buyer packet that's a buyer consultation prepared for you, an electronic version for a presentation. They're going to show us how to edit those. And we also have somebody in our office, if you want somebody else to do that for you, that can do that, of course, at a cost, but there's somebody else that will prepare that if you want. All right. I did put down here the buyer broker agreement to show property. That is probably going to be used in a very quick scenario where you're at an open house and somebody says, I want to see the home down the street. Great, let me take you down there and let's go look at it. Let me get you to sign this because I can't show you that home without a showing agreement, okay? You could do it for a week and schedule the appointment to go through all of this and do your buyer consultation after that. So I did put it down there. I meant to take off the number 5 actually, just so you knew that it was an option there. I highly recommend doing the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement, but of course we do have that showing property for the short term if you need something immediately. All right, here is the ABA, just in case you've not seen it. Rock Title is here in the house. They're upstairs. For those that do not understand, Cuba owns both Realty One Group and Rock Title, okay? So that is his company. He owns both of those. There is an arrangement with American Home Shield for the One Home Warranty Inc. Affiliation that we're able to brand that way. And then we have Epic Lending is partially owned. It's a merger between Cuba and CMG, which is a lending institution, and there are specific rates that are already pre-set. We can't change these rates, but they're posted rates. And then the One Asset Exchange is a 1031 exchange company. The third page is a marketing arrangement disclosure, which talks about agreements between Realty One Group and an insurance provider, Move Easy, and Old Republic Home Protection. So it's just a different type of affiliation and agreement. If you've noticed, these 3 pages, these were revised in November of 2023. The address has been removed. All you need on these is the buyer's signatures or the seller's signatures to understand they were given these disclosures, okay? You don't have to assign them to a property anymore. Thank goodness. We were arguing back and forth with our attorneys on this. But this allows you to have it as a part of your buyer presentation so they understand those agreements and arrangements that they may save money. If you are taking a listing and not taking advantage of at least advertising that both buyer and seller can save 50% off their escrow fees, not title fees, but escrow fees, which in some cases could be literally, you know, several $100 up to $600 or $700, depending on the price of the home. Usually I'm seeing usually a savings about $200 to $300 per side. But I don't know about you, but I'm arguing for every penny I can save my clients, right? So when you start bringing up that you could potentially save some money, why not at least give them that opportunity to save a few $100s? Right? When we're talking about trying to negotiate all sorts of things, these are benefits to you. Use this opportunity to talk about those relationships. For Epic Lending, we have great resources from them. They're offering some amazing programs, including their buyback, right? They can refinance within 5 years. As long as they've made 6 payments, they can refinance over and over. Epic is not going to charge them the handling charge, and they're giving $1,000 for the incidentals like appraisals and title fees that may be involved. So it's some really great products. If you're not aware of them, please come in and talk to Barb in our office to learn more. She's not here today because she's enjoying a little summer vacation. So let's get on to the next one. Here's the buyer advisory, and no, I'm not going through all of this. And I don't even have it all on here. Please make sure you are using the November of 2023 version. However, this is the first page. I highly recommend you go online. This is the last page And you get this through the Arizona Association of Realtors. That's where you can get it electronically. If you are not familiar with going to aaronline.com, that's how you get to the Arizona Association of Realtors website. Down on the bottom, if you go to risk management on the top, under risk management, you will see buyer advisory on the left. What are other advisories that might be there, just since we're here? Who knows?
Did you do waterfall already?
No, how about a tenant advisory? You know, there's a tenant advisory out there, right? You would find that under the other advisories right there. So, no, I didn't go over any of the other disclosures. Those aren't advisories. So, okay. Oh, and by the way, whoops, let's go back to this. If you are ever asked to send over a copy of a contract, please, please, please come here to the sample forms. If you click on that, it will say sample across it like this, right? Do not ever, ever, ever send over through your SkySlope forms or transaction desk a blank copy of any of these documents, because they're copyrighted by the Arizona Association of Realtors. And guess what? Your name is printed on the bottom of that. So if that person goes out and uses that form illegally, guess who's going to get that phone call? I will, or the designated broker will, because your name is on the bottom of a form that shouldn't have been used by somebody that does not have the legal right to use it. And please know they do pursue those copyrights over and over and over. They are very particular about that. So please make sure you use the sample version.
I've actually gotten a for sale by owner with a sample contract.
That's funny. So for those online, if you did not hear that, Roberta says she has received a purchase contract by a for sale by owner seller using sample written all across it. They used that version of the form to submit. And what'd you do?
Drew my own escrow instructions.
So there you go. Couldn't use it. It's not. And by the way, if you have not read through the purchase contract, you should read through the purchase contract. And I'll challenge all of you to read through it with the thought of trying to remove the word broker, agent, or I think it's like representative. So if you're representing the party, you're in there throughout that document. You cannot remove those sections in the back and just expect the rest of the contract to actually apply. It doesn't, because it references those sections. It must be delivered to, right? It's not considered delivered until sent to the person in section, I don't know, 9D or whatever it is, right? So, I probably can't find it that fast. Yeah, it references section 9A, right? It has to be returned to section 9A. Nobody's on 9A, it's not deliverable. It doesn't work, right? The contract itself falls apart. It is designed for realtors. Okay, so here is when you click all the way through to that buyer advisory, this is the page that will come up. We have a version both in Spanish and in English. If they click on this, they get the latest update. And below this, and I didn't put the rest of the screen because I wanted this really large, but they actually have sign up for updates. Your clients can sign up on the association's website if we update, and by the way, they update that about 3 times a year. If they update links in there, not our advisory itself, but the links inside there, they will send out whoever signed up for those updates to know that they've updated the links. So it's a really, really cool thing to give your client. I tell buyers and sellers all the time, this is great during the process, but this is even more important in the future. If you have a question about something, if you're having an issue with an HOA, this has the links to the state offices that you can get information out of that on HOA rules and regulations and stuff like that. I don't have that information, right? All right, so I threw up here for those that did not attend the meeting last Thursday, the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement. You will see this still has a bunch of red. This has not been approved, but I did just throw this in here so you could see that we do have a new 4-page document that is being worked on. There is a lot of red, there is a lot of new to this document. We will start going over the whole thing once we get the finalized version. No point in going over it if it's going to change. So we're not going to do that right now. This is the showing agreement. Sorry, you guys can't see the top of that, but this is this new buyer broker agreement to show property form. It is a 1-page simple form. We're still waiting on the final confirmation of it. Once it gets the final confirmation, you will see numbers on the left-hand side. Again, this is not a finalized version. I know I was really talking a lot here. We actually have 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can continue having a conversation here. I just knew I had a lot to get through there. There is a lot on agency, and I hope you guys will literally, I know I read through a lot of it, but I did not read through all of it. Please take a few minutes today, read the entire agency disclosure and election. Please look through that. Become comfortable in sharing it with somebody else. If you have never presented an agency disclosure to have somebody sign, practice it with somebody. Practice it with a friend, practice it with a spouse, practice it with another agent here. Come in and say, hey, can I present this to you as if you're my new buyer? I want to go over this with you so you can understand this. Ask questions, right? So have that opportunity to have that dialogue. Hi, Coey.
Hi, I have a quick question for you. When you have a client that is in the process of selling their home and now they're going to step up into a bigger home, how are you handling that with that buyer and seller? So now the seller is now the buyer. Before, like my client's selling a $500,000 home, it was their beginner home, and now they're selling, they want to buy like a $900,000 home. And I'm struggling with how to talk to them about it.
Are you concerned about commission? You haven't said commission, but are you concerned about commission? Or are you
I'm concerned about how to, like, like having the conversation around my commission and selling the house is one thing, and suggesting that they offer one as well. But now I'm going to have them sign this broker agreement. It's like, well, you're going to pay me again, and we have no guarantee that this other person that's going to be you're going to buy your house from will be offering a commission. I dread having that conversation.
Well, I think you need to, yeah, if they're not paying you, if they don't sign with you, they're gonna probably sign with somebody else.
Somebody else, yeah.
So I don't know that that's an issue. I think the concern or one way you might approach it, and I'll let other people comment as well, but is if you're taking the listing contract, especially if you're going from a small home to a bigger home, right? You're going to make more on the bigger home than on the smaller home, right? Theoretically.
Mhm.
So
Potentially.
you could offer your seller a discount on the listing side if they sign the buyer broker agreement at that 3% or whatever. And we're all Realty, hopefully we're all Realty One Group here. That's who should have come on to my call. So you can offer the discount on the one end and get the buyer broker signed on the other. And yes, they understand they may be responsible for the 3%, but when you're having the conversation with them about paying a buyer broker, I think your conversation has to talk about how that is going to be in their best interest. Now, they don't have to offer a commission, but at the same point, when they're filling out that buyer broker, if the other side isn't offering it, they're going to feel immediately, wait a minute, I have to pay this? So I think that is the conversation, and that's going to help you get them as the seller to agree to pay that. And again, if you offer that discount on the selling side, not the buying side, the selling side, that's saving your seller on something very tangible up front. They know they may have to pay it on the other end, or they may not. right? But they can see a savings that you're offering by doing both sides of that transaction. Any other suggestions, folks? Other people want to
Perfect.
make a comment? No?
You
So-
could have the
Go ahead.
yeah, you could have the conversation after you decide, if it's 3%, that you will reach out to the listing agent prior to and find out what the seller is offering. If it's less than your agreed amount on the buyer broker agreement, you can have that discussion as to, do you want to even see these? Do you want me to have the conversation with the listing agent, on the possibility of making up the difference if you're signed at 2.5 or 3% and they're out offering 2.5 and so on.
But again, if you have saved them money on their listing side, on your portion, think they're going to appreciate that and be working with you on the buy side. And if you're a good negotiator, right? If somebody's offering 2 or 2.5%, I'm pretty confident myself that I'm gonna try to figure out a way to negotiate that as a part of the offer. And if not, then I'll deal with it in the end. But I think where we have a big issue is when somebody's truly offering zero, right? When we're going to run into these where the seller is offering zero, we talk to the agent and the agent says they're not going to pay a dime. Doesn't matter what you do. They're not paying concessions. They're not doing anything. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be more challenging to deal with. I've had several people call me in the last 2 or 3 weeks saying their seller wanted to know when this lawsuit was going to be done so they could get rid of their co-broke to the buyer on their listing. And I said, call them back, take it off. It's negotiable, remove it. But after that the next sentence needs to be, and how soon did you want to sell? Because everybody else right now that you're up against, we can see that they're offering 2.5, 3%, and you're going to change yours to zero. Just know that I'm going to get the phone calls asking what you're offering as a co-broke, and I'm going to have to tell them zero. If that's what you want to do, you can do that right now. It's negotiable. Go ahead and remove it. Right? And I will tell you up front, guys, I sign everybody's CDIs. I am seeing more and more buyer brokers being paid at a higher amount than I have in the last year. Now, it's not across the board. It's not flat, but I'm seeing much more of them at that higher end than I did over the last 9 months. Am I seeing more listing sides going down? Yes, I am. Am I seeing more combos where they're doing both sides? Apparently, because I'm seeing 4.5%, 5% being given to one agent. Okay, they're probably, I'm not looking at that point, looking up the file. So for those of you thinking that all doom and gloom, let's roll down this street together. I really, really believe that people want a protector on their side. They want somebody looking out for their best interests. How many of you would go into a court of law without an attorney? How many of you would go, well, ladies out there, how many of you will go to a car dealership without a guy?
Sorry.
How many of you would go to an auto?
I'll do it.
Before court.
Before court, right? But you know what I'm talking about, right? How many times are you taken advantage of in an auto dealership if you don't have somebody that knows something about cars and how those numbers work and all that stuff? It's a nightmare. And yes, I've done it myself as well. I get that. But the point is, people want an advocate. They want somebody looking out for their best interest. They want somebody to help them. On the single largest purchase of their lives at this time, for most people, I will bet you that people are going to want to, whoops, get rid of that sound. There we go. People are going to want help. Now, at what cost? That's the negotiation, right? What are they willing to pay for it? That's the challenge. But I will tell you, oh, and actually, let me ask a big question. When are the times you cannot do limited representation? When can you not represent the seller? There are two times, the seller and the buyer.
Relative and agent owner.
Owner, agent, and relative. So I had a scenario, the deal fell through, but my brother, don't even ask me, the property's not on the market, but somebody wants an off-market property, come give me a call. But I can't represent the buyer, and he had somebody that said they wanted to buy it. And I'm like, I can't represent them. I can't talk to them about asking for closing costs. I can't do anything, right? I cannot, all I can do is fair dealing, right? I can present this. So it was horrible. I am such an advocate for people, and it was horrible. I mean, I understand why you can't do that, because ultimately the weight has to be on your relative or yourself. But for me, it tore me up. Like, this person is doing everything possible wrong. And I couldn't say anything, right? And that's, I hate to say, that's not fair dealing. They just didn't understand. They didn't get it. And thankfully they backed out, because they had gone to some investor to buy their home. Because I couldn't offer to list their home, because what am I doing if I do that? I'm creating agency. I can't have agency on one side and no agency on the other side, because I've created agency. You can't do that. Oh, hey, I'll help you today. Oh yeah, tomorrow you're gonna ask me a question. Sorry, doesn't work that way. I couldn't do it. I would have loved to have sold this woman's home. Very nice couple, could have sold it for a ton of money. They went to an investor. They were getting just totally ripped off. And they canceled the deal because they finally realized they were getting totally ripped off to make this happen. So you cannot represent yourself. If you are selling your own property, please don't hold an open house yourself, because you can't represent those buyers. Have somebody else set your house open if that's what you want to do. I did have somebody ask me if they were to put that that the seller didn't want any unrepresented buyers and put that in the listing. And I said, no, because an unrepresented buyer isn't going to find it, because they're not working with anybody to get in there to get it. They're going to call you. They're not a unrepresented buyer. They're going to call you somehow on a, an open house, or I don't know how they're going to find you, but they're not finding you from another realtor. So don't put that in there. Just, if your seller doesn't want an unrepresented buyer, they can absolutely say, I do not want an unrepresented buyer. And if they're paying a buyer broker, say, look, your agency's being covered. Go find an agent. All right. Can you get a referral fee if you're on an open house and you don't want to represent that buyer? Can you get a referral fee by calling another agent and saying, hey, I got a buyer here that wants to buy, write an offer. Can you write the offer for him?
Yes.
Sure can. Sure can. You're passing off a potential client, right? But if they are trying to write on that property and your seller does not want you as a dual agent, right? You literally personally doing that. They're fine with limited representation, but don't want you to do both. That's, then you can't, right? But you sure can refer them. Get a referral document out, send it over. Now, if they don't want another Realty One Group agent, some agents at other companies, send it to somebody else. Hate to do it, but that's what you got to do. Questions? I know I've hit 11 o'clock, but any questions? No other questions? Please,
Carmen.
please take, yes, no, Coey, you're good.
Oh, I have so many, but I'm sure I'll let you go.
Please,
I always have questions.
please take a minute today and read through both sides of this agency document. Really take a few minutes, read it line by line. If you have not read the ER and the buyer broker, I'm sorry, don't read the buyer broker. If you haven't read the purchase contract and the ER, I would read through both of those. It's amazing if you just take some time. It takes about 10 minutes to read through that contract if you're not talking to anybody through it. If you're talking to somebody through it, it takes about an hour, by the way. But really start to read these documents. That is your fiduciary care and duty. You need to understand these documents because you've got to communicate them. And the more you're comfortable with them, the more you're comfortable communicating to your clients. You guys have a great Tuesday. Stay cool. And go buy some houses. Go sell some houses. All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.